My husband filed for divorce to be with my best friend after I inherited my mom's fortune. He thought he hit the jackpot, but my mom outsmarted them both. Hello everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I begin my story, I'd love to know which city you're joining us from. Please feel free to share in the comments. Now, let me take you into this story. The steam from the roast beef was still curling up towards the kitchen light when my entire life fractured into a million jagged pieces. I can still smell the rosemary and garlic. It's funny how tragedy anchors itself to the senses. I had spent 6 hours cooking. I was wearing the silk dress Gary used to say made me look like a movie star. And the candles were already burning low, dripping wax onto the linen tablecloth I only brought out for special occasions. It was our 15th anniversary. Well, technically it was next week, but Gary had a business trip scheduled, so we were celebrating early. Or so I thought. When the front door opened, I put on my brightest smile, holding 2 glasses of the expensive Cabernet he liked. But Gary didn't smile back. He didn't even take off his coat. He just stood there in the entryway of the home we had built together, looking at me with an expression I had never seen before. It wasn't anger. It was boredom. Cold, detached, absolute boredom. He walked past me, ignoring the wine, ignoring the food, and tossed a thick manila envelope onto the dining table. It landed right next to the anniversary card I had written for him. The sound of that heavy envelope hitting the wood echoed like a gunshot in the quiet house. "I'm done, Brenda," he said, his voice flat. "I want a divorce." I stood there, the wine glasses trembling in my hands. The room seemed to tilt sideways. "What, Gary? What are you talking about? It's our anniversary dinner. Is this a joke?" "No joke," he said, loosening his tie as if he were just coming home from a long day at the office and not ending a decade and a half of marriage. "I've been unhappy for a long time. We've grown apart. I can't do this pretending game anymore. I want out." "Unhappy?" I stammered, setting the glasses down before I dropped them. "Gary, 2 days ago, we were talking about booking a cruise for the summer. You kissed me this morning before you left. You said you loved me." He sighed, a sound of pure irritation. "That's what people say, Brenda. Look, the paperwork is there. I've already moved my essentials into a storage unit while you were at work yesterday. I'm staying at a hotel tonight. I want this done quickly. No messy fights. Just sign the papers and we split everything down the middle." Split everything. The words hung in the air. Suddenly, a cold realization washed over me. It had been exactly 8 weeks since the lawyer, Mr. Harrison, had called us into his office to read my mother's final estate summary. $2 million. That was the inheritance my mother, Eleanor, had left me. Before that day, Gary had been distant. Sure, he had been spending late nights at the office, complaining about his stalled career, about how life was unfair to him. But the moment that number, 2 million, was spoken aloud, he had changed. He had become attentive again. Sweet. He had started talking about our future, about our money, and now he wanted a divorce. "This is about the money, isn't it?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Gary's eyes narrowed. "Don't be disgusting. This is about us not working. But yes, obviously the assets will need to be divided. It's the law, Brenda. Community property. I've sacrificed 15 years of my life for this marriage. I deserve my fair share of the settlement." He checked his watch. He actually checked his watch while destroying my life. "I have to go. My lawyer will be in touch." He turned to leave and that's when my phone buzzed on the counter. The screen lit up. It was a text from Pamela, my best friend of 20 years. My confidante, the woman I had cried to when my mother died. The woman who had held my hand through my miscarriages. The message read, "Hey sweetie, are you okay? Gary just texted me and said, he did it. I'm so worried about you. Call me if you need anything." I looked from the phone to Gary's back. "Pamela knows?" I asked. "You told Pamela before you told me." Gary paused, his hand on the doorknob. He didn't turn around. "She's your best friend, Brenda. I thought she should know so she could support you." Then he walked out. The door clicked shut. I stood alone in the silence, surrounded by the smell of a cooling roast beef dinner. I felt like I couldn't breathe, like the air had been sucked out of the room. He was gone just like that. But something wasn't right. The way he checked his watch. The way Pamela texted instantly, almost too perfectly timed. "Thank you so much for tuning in. Before I tell you what I discovered that night, something that made this pain feel like a tickle compared to the knife in my back. Please, if you're listening from your kitchen, your car, or your living room, let me know in the comments where you are joining me from. It helps me feel less alone sharing this." I walked over to the table and picked up the envelope. Divorce. The word looked so ugly on the paper. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold it. I looked at the text from Pamela again. "I'm so worried about you. It sounded so caring, so supportive. But why did I feel a knot of nausea tightening in my stomach? I didn't know it yet, but the man I loved and the best friend I trusted were about to teach me a lesson in cruelty that would change me forever. But they forgot one thing. They forgot whose daughter I was. They forgot that my mother, Eleanor, never played a game she didn't intend to win. I sank onto the kitchen floor, the divorce papers crinkling under my hand, and let the tears come. But as I wept, my mind didn't go to the happy memories with Gary. Instead, it drifted back to Pamela. Pamela and I had been inseparable since college. We were the classic duo, the quiet, studious one, that was me, and the vibrant, loud, center of attention queen bee, that was Pamela. For 20 years, I had been her shadow. When she went through her first divorce, I let her sleep in my guest room for 3 months. I cooked her meals. I listened to her rant about how men were trash. I loaned her money she never paid back. When her second husband left her for a younger woman, I was there again picking up the pieces. But looking back now, sitting on the cold tiles of my kitchen floor, I started to see the cracks in the mosaic of our friendship. I remembered the little digs. The way she would look at my engagement ring and say, "It's cute, Brenda." Small but cute. The way she would sigh when Gary got a promotion years ago and say, "Must be nice to have a husband who actually works, even if he isn't exactly CEO material." There was always a hunger in Pamela, a need to have what I had, simply because I had it. I remembered my mother's funeral 6 months ago. It was a rainy, miserable day in November. I was a wreck, barely able to stand. My mother, Eleanor, had been my rock. She was a tough woman, a self-made businesswoman who had raised me alone after my father died. She had a sharp tongue and an even sharper mind. She could spot a liar from across a crowded room. And she had never ever liked Pamela. "That woman is a vampire, Brenda," Mom used to tell me, sipping her iced tea on the porch. "She doesn't have her own light, so she sucks up yours. Watch your back with her and keep her away from Gary. A woman like that doesn't want a husband. She wants your husband." I had dismissed it as Mom being overprotective. "You're just cynical, Mom." I'd say Pamela loves me. She's my sister and everything but blood. At the funeral, Pamela had made a scene. She wore a black dress that was just a little too tight, a little too short. She sobbed louder than anyone during the service, dabbing at dry eyes with a lace handkerchief. But what haunted me now in the silence of my empty house was a specific image from the graveside. I was standing by the coffin placing a white rose on the wood. I turned around to find Gary. He wasn't behind me. He was standing under a large oak tree a few yards away. Pamela was there with him. She had her hand on his chest, right over his heart. She was whispering something to him, her face close to his. When she saw me looking, she didn't pull away immediately. She lingered for a second, then patted his lapel and walked toward me with a sad, tragic smile. "He's just so devastated for you, honey," she had told me, linking her arm through mine. "I was just telling him he needs to be strong for you." I believed her. God, I was so stupid. I believed her because I wanted to believe that the people I loved were good. I wanted to believe that betrayal was something that happened in movies, not to a 42-year-old accountant who paid her taxes and remembered everyone's birthdays. But Mom knew. Even in her final days, when the cancer was taking her bit by bit, she grabbed my hand with surprising strength. "Brenda," she wheezed, "your inheritance. Protect it, Gary. He's weak. And weak men do terrible things when they smell money. Don't let them take what I built for you." "Them?" I had asked. "You mean Gary?" "I mean the sharks, Brenda. The sharks are circling." I wiped my eyes and looked at my phone again. Pamela's text was still there. "Gary just texted me." Why would my husband in the moment of destroying our marriage text my best friend before he even left the driveway? Unless it wasn't a text to inform her. Unless it was a text to signal her, a signal that the plan was in motion. I felt a wave of nausea, but this time it wasn't from grief. It was from a sudden burning suspicion. I stood up. I needed to know. I couldn't just sit here and wait for the lawyers to carve up my life. I grabbed my keys. I wasn't going to call Pamela. I was going to go to her house. I needed to see her face when I told her the news. I needed to see if the worry in her text matched the look in her eyes. I didn't know it then, but I was driving straight into the heart of the storm. As I drove through the dark suburban streets toward Pamela's condo, my mind replayed the events of the last 2 months. To understand why Gary walked out tonight, you have to understand the money. The money changed everything. It acted like a chemical reagent, revealing the invisible rot that had been spreading under the surface of my marriage for years. 2 months ago, Gary and I sat in Mr. Harrison's office. Mr. Harrison had been my mother's lawyer for 30 years. He was a man of few words with eyes that seemed to see right through you. The office smelled of old leather and expensive mahogany. "Brenda," Mr. Harrison had said, peering over his spectacles, Your mother was a very shrewd investor. She lived modestly, as you know, but she bought land in the 80s. She invested in tech stocks in the 90s, and she rarely sold. Her estate after taxes and settlements amounts to $2,150,000. I gasped. I knew Mom was comfortable, but I had no idea she was a millionaire twice over. $2 million? I whispered. Next to me, Gary stiffened. I felt his hand grip my knee. It wasn't a comforting grip. It was tight, possessive. $2 million, Gary repeated, his voice cracking slightly. Liquid? Mostly liquid assets and securities. Yes, Mr. Harrison said, his gaze flickering briefly to Gary with a hint of distaste. And the house, of course. From that moment on, the Gary I knew, the man who complained about the price of gas, the man who refused to buy new tires for my car until they were bald, disappeared. In his place was a man drunk on potential wealth. On the drive home from the lawyer's office that day, Gary was euphoric. Baby, do you know what this means? He had shouted, pounding the steering wheel. We're rich. We can finally quit our jobs. I can tell my boss to shove it. We can buy that boat I've always wanted. We can move to Florida. Gary, slow down, I had said, feeling overwhelmed. It's Mom's money. I'm not just going to blow it. I want to be smart. Maybe put some in a retirement fund. Maybe set up a college fund for your sister's kids. College fund? Gary scoffed. Brenda, don't be boring. This is our chance to live. We deserve this. That was the first red flag. Everything was we. In the weeks that followed, the pressure mounted. Gary started bringing home brochures for luxury villas. He started talking about high-risk crypto investments. He wanted me to transfer a lump sum into a joint account for easier management. Why do you keep the money in that separate trust account? He argued one night over dinner, slamming his fork down. Don't you trust me? I'm your husband. It's insulting, Brenda. It's financial abuse keeping me locked out like this. It's not locked out, Gary. I tried to reason. Mr. Harrison advised me to keep the inheritance separate for tax purposes for now. We can use it for things we need, but I'm not just going to merge everything overnight. Need? Gary sneered. We need a new life. You're just like your mother. Stingy, controlling. He began to withdraw. He stopped sleeping in our bed, claiming his back hurt and the guest room mattress was better. He spent hours on his phone, texting, smiling at the screen, then turning it off the second I walked into the room. When I asked him who he was talking to, he'd say, just work stuff. Trying to secure a deal so I don't have to beg my wife for pocket money. I felt guilty. Can you believe that? I actually felt guilty for inheriting money. He made me feel like a villain for wanting to be responsible. I started to wonder if I was being selfish. Maybe I should just give him half. Maybe that would fix our marriage. Maybe money was the only barrier between us and happiness. But then there was Pamela. During this time, Pamela was surprisingly quiet. Usually, she would be the first to give unsolicited advice. But when I told her about the inheritance, she went strangely still. $2 million? She had asked, her eyes widening. Wow, that's a lot of money, Brenda. Good for you. Gary is acting weird about it. I confided in her over coffee a week later. He wants to spend it all immediately. Pamela stirred her latte slowly, watching the foam swirl. Well, can you blame him? She said softly. Men need to feel like providers, Brenda. Or at least like partners. If you hold the purse strings too tight, you emasculate him. Maybe you should let him manage a portion of it. Let him feel like a man. It might save your marriage. You think so? I asked, desperate for a solution. I know so. Pamela smiled. If I were you, I'd show him you trust him. Money is just paper, Brenda. Love is what matters. Looking back, I want to scream at my past self. I want to shake her. Pamela wasn't giving me advice to save my marriage. She was giving me advice to fund her future. She was paving the road for Gary to get his hands on the cash. Because tonight, as I turned the corner onto Pamela Street, I saw something that made my blood turn to ice. Something that connected all the dots. The sudden demand for divorce, the pressure to merge accounts, Pamela's terrible advice. There, parked in Pamela's driveway, clearly visible under the street lamp, was Gary's silver sedan. The same car he had driven away in an hour ago. The same car he said he was taking to a hotel. I pulled my car to the curb 3 houses down and killed the engine. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Don't jump to conclusions, a tiny, pathetic voice in my head whispered. Maybe he went there to cry. Maybe he needed a friend just like you were coming to find. But I knew deep down in my gut where the survival instinct lives. I knew. I stepped out of the car. The night air was crisp, typical for late autumn. I wrapped my cardigan tighter around myself and walked quietly toward Pamela's condo. It was a ground floor unit with a large bay window facing the street. Pamela always kept her curtains open. She liked the world to see her expensive furniture, her art prints, her perfect life. Tonight, the curtains were sheer. The warm golden light from the living room spilled out onto the lawn. As I got closer, crouching behind the hedge that lined her walkway, I saw them. They weren't crying. They weren't mourning the end of my marriage. Gary was sitting on Pamela's beige sofa, the one I had helped her pick out at IKEA 3 years ago. He had his shirt unbuttoned halfway down his chest, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. He looked relaxed, triumphant even. And Pamela was walking into the room carrying a bottle of champagne. She was wearing a silk robe, not just any robe. It was the emerald green silk robe I had bought her for her birthday last year. I remembered the card I had written for the most glamorous woman I know. Love your sister, Brenda. She sat down next to Gary, not with the distance of a friend, but with the familiarity of a lover. She curled her legs up and leaned into him. Gary laughed, a loud, booming laugh that I hadn't heard in years, and kissed her forehead. Then he kissed her nose. Then he kissed her lips. It wasn't a tentative kiss. It was deep, hungry, and practiced. I clapped a hand over my mouth to stop the scream that was clawing its way up my throat. My knees gave out, and I sank into the wet grass behind the hedge. The betrayal hit me in waves. First, it was the shock. Then, the physical pain, a sharp, twisting agony in my stomach, then the memories. Every time Pamela had come over for dinner. Every time Gary had driven her home because it was late. Every time they had texted. All the girls' nights Pamela had cancelled at the last minute. All the late meetings Gary had. They had been laughing at me. For how long? Months? Years? I forced myself to look again. I had to be sure. I had to burn this image into my retinas so I would never ever be weak enough to forgive them. Through the glass, I saw Pamela raise her champagne flute. She said something. I couldn't hear the words, but I could read her lips. She had distinct expressive lips. To us, she mouthed. And to the money. Gary clinked his glass against hers. To the money. That was it. The final nail in the coffin of my past life. They weren't just having an affair. They were celebrating a heist, my inheritance, my mother's life savings. They were drinking a toast to my ruin. I watched as Pamela reached for a folder on the coffee table. She pulled out a brochure. I squinted. It was a brochure for a luxury housing development called Lakeside Estates. Expensive. Exclusive. She pointed to a picture, traced her finger over it, and looked at Gary with greedy, sparkling eyes. He nodded, looking like the cat that got the cream. They were already spending it. They were planning their new life funded by my divorce settlement. They assumed with absolute arrogance that I would crumble, that I would sign the papers, give Gary his fair share of the community assets, which they assumed included my inheritance, and fade away into the background like I always did. I wanted to storm in there. I wanted to smash the window. I wanted to scream until the police came. I wanted to tear that green robe off her back and slap the smug look off Gary's face. But then I heard my mother's voice in my head again, clear as a bell. Brenda, never let them see you bleed. If you react with anger, you're just a crazy ex-wife. If you react with silence, you're a mystery. And people fear mysteries. I took a deep breath. The cold air filled my lungs, sobering me. If I went in there now, I would lose. I would give them the satisfaction of my pain. They would spin it. They would say I was hysterical. Gary would use my outburst against me in court. He would claim emotional instability. No, I wasn't going to give them a show. I pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking, but I forced them to be steady. I aimed the camera through the gap in the hedge. I zoomed in. Click a photo of them kissing. Click a photo of the champagne toast. Click a photo of Gary's car in the driveway. Click a video just 10 seconds long capturing their relaxed intimacy. The way she stroked his hair. The way he looked at her with a passion he had never shown me. I had the evidence. Not that it mattered for a no-fault divorce state, but it mattered to me. It proved I wasn't crazy. It proved they were monsters. I stood up slowly, brushing the dirt off my knees. I looked at the window one last time. They looked so happy, so sure of their victory. Gary thought he had hit the jackpot. He thought he was trading in a boring wife for a fun model and getting $1 million bonus to boot. Enjoy the champagne, Gary. I thought, a cold rage settling in my chest where my heart used to be. Because it's the last expensive thing you're going to taste for a very long time. I walked back to my car, not as a victim, but as a witness. The crying was done. Now the accounting would begin. And if there was one thing I was good at, it was finding the discrepancies in the ledger. I drove home in silence. The house was dark when I arrived, a stark contrast to the warmth and light of Pamela's condo. I locked the door behind me and engaged the deadbolt. It was a small action, but it felt symbolic. I was locking them out. I went straight to the coffee pot. I didn't need wine. I needed caffeine. I needed to be sharp. It was 11 p.m. The night was young, and I had work to do. Gary had a home office down the hall. It was his man cave, the place where he allegedly worked on his big deals and managed the household finances. He always kept it locked, claiming he had sensitive client information. "I can't risk you moving papers around and losing things, Brenda," he would say. "You're too disorganized." I wasn't disorganized. I was a CPA. I organized complex tax returns for corporations, but I had let him gaslight me into believing I was incompetent in my own home. I went to the junk drawer in the kitchen. Hidden way in the back inside a box of old birthday candles was a spare key. I knew it was there because I had found it years ago and never told him. I had never used it, respecting his privacy, trusting him. But tonight, privacy was a luxury he had forfeited. I walked to the office door and slid the key in. It turned with a satisfying click. The room smelled of stale cigar smoke and cedar. I turned on the desk lamp. Papers were scattered everywhere. For someone who claimed I was messy, Gary lived in chaos. I sat in his leather chair, the chair I had bought him for Christmas, and started digging. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for. Maybe just confirmation. Maybe an explanation for why he was so desperate for money that he would blow up his life. I opened the bottom drawer. Locked. I grabbed a letter opener and jammed it into the mechanism, wiggling it until, pop, it sprang open. Flimsy lock for a man with so many secrets. Inside, buried under some old magazines, was a stack of envelopes. Red envelopes. Final notice passed due collection agency. I opened the first one. It was a credit card statement for a card I didn't know existed. The balance was $45,000. Maxed out. I scanned the charges. DraftKings FanDuel. The Lucky Dragon Casino. Online gambling. Thousands of dollars a week. I opened the next one. A personal loan from a company called Quick Cash. $30,000. Interest rate 25%. Another one. A cryptic IOU note scribbled on a napkin. Gary, you owe Tony $50K. Due by the 1st. Don't make us come to the house. My hands trembled as I tallied the numbers on a notepad. $45,000, $30,000, $50,000, plus the mortgage on the house that I thought we were paying down extra on. I checked the bank statements on his desk. He hadn't been paying the extra principal. He had been paying the bare minimum. Total debt over $200,000. And that was just what I could find in 10 minutes. The picture was becoming crystal clear. Gary wasn't just leaving me for Pamela because he was bored. He was leaving me because he was drowning. He needed a lifeboat and my inheritance was the only thing big enough to save him. He had probably promised Pamela the world. That condo they were looking at. He couldn't afford the doorknob on the front door. He was banking everything, literally everything, on getting a 50% split of my mother's money. He needed that $1 million to pay off the loan sharks, clear his gambling debts, and fund the fantasy life he had sold to Pamela. If he didn't get the money, he was dead, or at least financially ruined. I sat back in the chair, feeling a strange mix of horror and vindication. I wasn't the problem. My looks, my personality, my boring nature. None of that was the real reason. It was math. Cold, hard math. I was an asset to be liquidated. I took photos of every document, every statement, every threat. I backed them up to the cloud. Then I put everything back exactly as I found it. I locked the drawer. I locked the door. I went to my bedroom now, and lay down. I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling fan spinning in the dark. They thought I was weak. They thought I was the nice Brenda who would cry for a week and then sign whatever paper they put in front of her just to make the pain stop. But they didn't know what I had found in that drawer. And they definitely didn't know what I was going to do next. Tomorrow I had an appointment to make, not with a therapist, not with a marriage counselor. I was going to see Mr. Harrison, and I was going to ask him about a specific clause in my mother's will, something she had hinted at. Something I had been too grief-stricken to pay attention to at the time. Gary wanted a game. Fine. I was going to play, but I wasn't playing for love anymore. I was playing for blood. The next morning, I called in sick to work. It was the first time in 10 years I had done that without actually being ill. I put on a sharp black blazer, dark sunglasses to hide my swollen eyes, and drove straight to downtown. Mr. Harrison's office was a sanctuary of calm compared to the chaos inside my head. The receptionist, an older woman named Martha, who used to give me lollipops when I was a kid, looked at me with concern. "Mr. Harrison cleared his schedule for you, Brenda," she said softly. "Go right in." Mr. Harrison was standing by the window, looking out at the city skyline. When I entered, he turned and gave me a sad smile. He didn't offer a platitude, he just pointed to the chair. "Gary filed the papers this morning," he said. "His lawyer sent a digital copy 10 minutes ago." "That was fast," I said, my voice steady. "He wants half, doesn't he?" He's asking for an equitable division of all assets, alimony for lifestyle maintenance. And Mr. Harrison paused, looking down at the paper. He's claiming that your inheritance was coming led with marital funds because you used joint accounts for some household expenses. I bought groceries, I snapped. I paid the electric bill. That doesn't mean I gave him the money. I know, Brenda. I know. But he's going to fight and he's going to make it ugly. Mr. Harrison sat down and leaned forward. But before we talk about defense, we need to talk about your mother. My mother? Eleanor was a brilliant woman, Brenda. But she was also a woman who had been burned. Your father? Well, you were too young to remember, but he wasn't always kind with money. Your mother learned the hard way. He opened a thick file on his desk. It was the original copy of my mother's will. When Eleanor drafted this will 3 years ago, she came to me with very specific concerns. She told me, Arthur, Gary is a man with hollow eyes. He's always looking for the next shiny thing. And that friend of Brenda's, Pamela, she's a snake in the grass. Tears pricked my eyes. Mom had seen it all. Even back then, your mother insisted on inserting a clause. We call it a poison pill in the corporate world, but in estate law, it's a conditional bequest. I tried to explain it to you the day we read the will, but you were distraught and Gary was interrupting. I remembered that day. Gary kept asking about transfer times and tax implications. I hadn't been listening to the fine print. What does the clause say? I asked. Mr. Harrison turned the document toward me and pointed to a paragraph highlighted in yellow. Article 4, Section C, the Fidelity Clause. Read it, he urged. I read aloud, the entirety of the estate, totaling $2.1 million, shall be held in a blind trust. The beneficiary, Brenda Miller, shall have access to the interest generated by the trust for the duration of her marriage to Gary Miller. However, the principal sum shall remain locked. Wait, I said, confused. So, I can't touch the money? Keep reading, Mr. Harrison said. In the event that the marriage between Brenda Miller and Gary Miller is dissolved, the distribution of the trust depends on the nature of the dissolution. If the divorce is filed due to proven infidelity, adultery on the part of Gary Miller, the blind trust shall be immediately dissolved, and 100% of the principal and interest shall be transferred to Brenda Miller as her sole and separate property, untouchable by any marital settlement claims. My breath caught in my throat. However, I continued reading. If Brenda Miller voluntarily shares any portion of this inheritance with Gary Miller prior to a divorce or if she fails to provide proof of infidelity, the trust shall remain locked for a period of 10 years. And here is the kicker, Mr. Harrison said, tapping the bottom of the page. If Gary Miller attempts to claim any portion of this inheritance through legal action while proven to be in an adulterous relationship, the entire estate shall be immediately liquidated and donated to the Happy Tales Animal Rescue Charity, leaving both parties with zero. I stared at the lawyer. Mom set a trap. She built a fortress. Mr. Harrison corrected. She knew that if Gary loved you, the money would stay in the trust and support you both slowly. But if he was greedy and if he was cheating, she wanted to make sure he couldn't touch a dime. And she wanted to make sure you had the leverage to walk away clean. So I said, my mind racing, if I divorce him now and prove he's cheating, I get everything. And he gets nothing, correct? But there's a catch. We need irrefutable proof, not just suspicion. We need court-admissible evidence. And he paused. We need him to commit. We need him to pursue the money aggressively. If he backs down, the clause is harder to trigger. We need him to walk right into the trap. I thought about the photos on my phone, the video of them kissing, the debt collection letters. I have proof, I said. I saw them last night. I have pictures. Mr. Harrison nodded impressively. Good, but don't show your hand yet. If Gary knows about this clause, he might try to stay married just to spite you. Or he might try to manipulate the situation. He needs to think he's winning. He needs to think you are weak, scared, and ready to settle. He already thinks that, I said bitterly. Excellent, Mr. Harrison smiled. A shark-like smile that made me glad he was on my side. Then we let him think it. We let him dig his own grave. We dragged this out just long enough for him to get desperate. You said he has debts over 200 grand. Perfect. Desperate men make mistakes. We are going to let him believe he's about to get $1 million check. We'll let him spend money he doesn't have. And then when he's fully committed, we snap the trap. I sat back feeling a surge of power. For the first time since Gary walked out, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like Eleanor's daughter. So, what do? I asked. You go home, Mr. Harrison said. You answer his calls. You cry. You beg him to come back. And then reluctantly you agree to his terms. You play the role of the heartbroken wife who just wants to make him happy one last time. I can do that, I said. Can you? He asked. Seriously. It will be hard, Brenda. He will be cruel. Pamela will be fake. You have to swallow your pride. I thought of Pamela in that green robe. I thought of Gary's boredom. Mr. Harrison, I said, standing up and smoothing my blazer for $2 million. And the look on their faces, I can win an Oscar. The performance of my life began the moment I walked out of that office. I sat in my car and took a few deep breaths, summoning every ounce of sadness I had felt the night before. Then I dialed Gary's number. He answered on the second ring. What? His voice was impatient. Gary, I said, letting my voice crack and tremble. I saw the email from your lawyer. Please, do we really have to do this? Can't we go to counseling? I heard a sigh on the other end. Brenda, stop. It's over. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Did you read the terms? I did. I sniffled. It's so much money, Gary. Half? Is that really fair? Fair? He exploded. I gave you the best years of my life. I supported you when your mother was sick. Yes, it's fair. Look, if you sign the agreement by the end of the week, I won't go after the house. You can keep the house. I just want my share of the liquid assets. He didn't want the house because he couldn't sell it fast enough to pay his bookie. He needed cash. Okay, I whispered. Okay, Gary, I just want this to be peaceful. If giving you the money means you'll be happy, then okay, good, he said, his tone instantly softening. That's sensible, Brenda. You're doing the right thing. I'll have my lawyer draw up the final settlement. We can meet next week to sign. Okay, I said, I love you, Gary. Yeah, he said and hung up. Step 1 complete. He thought I was rolling over. Step 2 was harder. I had to face Pamela. 2 days later, she texted me, honey, I haven't heard from you. I'm so worried. Let's grab lunch. My treat. I met her at a bistro we used to go to all the time. When I walked in, she stood up and hugged me tight. She smelled of expensive perfume, a new scent, probably bought with Gary's credit card. Oh, sweetie, look at you. She cooped, pulling back to inspect my face. I had deliberately worn no makeup and baggy clothes. You look exhausted. I haven't slept, I said, sliding into the booth. It's just a nightmare, Pam. I don't know what happened. Men, Pamela said, shaking her head and signaling the waiter. They go through these midlife crises. It's not your fault, Brenda. You are a good wife. The hesitation before good was a masterful little insult. He wants a divorce, I told her, staring at the menu. He wants half the inheritance. Pamela leaned in, her eyes sharp. Well, maybe you should just give it to him. What? I looked up, feigning shock. Hear me out, she said, reaching for my hand across the table. Her skin felt clammy. You have plenty of money now. Is fighting him really worth the stress? If you drag this out in court, the lawyers will take everything anyway. Just pay him off, Brenda. Pay for your freedom. You don't want him lingering around, do you? You want a clean break. That's what Gary said, I murmured. See, he's right. Just sign the check and be done with it. You can start over. You can travel, meet someone new, someone who appreciates you. It took every ounce of willpower not to throw my iced tea in her face. She was practically drooling at the thought of the settlement. She was coaching me to fund her life with my husband. I think you're right, I said, wiping a fake tear. I just want him to be happy, even if it's not with me. Exactly. Pamela beamed. You are so strong, Brenda. So generous. That's why I love you. Do you? I asked, looking her dead in the eye. For a split second, her smile faltered. Of course, you're my best friend. Then I'm glad I have you, I said. I'm going to sign the papers next week. Gary wants to meet at Mr. Harrison's office. Next week, Pamela asked, unable to hide her excitement. That's so soon. That's great. Yeah, actually, Pamela, could you come? Me? She blinked. Yes, I don't think I can face him alone. And since you're friends with both of us, maybe you could be there as a witness. Moral support. Pamela hesitated. I knew she was calculating. Being in the room meant she could ensure the deal went through. It meant she could celebrate with Gary immediately after. Of course, she said, squeezing my hand. I'll be right there by your side. Like always. Thank you, I said. I don't know what I'd do without you. I drove home feeling dirty. Lying to them was necessary, but watching them manipulate me was nauseating, but the trap was set. They both believed I was capitulating. They both believed the money was days away, and that was when the spending started. Over the next few days, I monitored the joint accounts, which Gary thought I was too stupid to check. The charges were astronomical. The Ritz-Carlton Tiffany & Company, Porsche dealership deposit. He wasn't just spending the credit limit. He was spending the inheritance he didn't have yet. He was digging a hole so deep he would never climb out of it. But the hardest part wasn't the acting. It was the waiting. Every day, Gary sent me texts pushing the timeline. Can we sign Tuesday instead of Friday? My lawyer needs the financial disclosures now. Why is Mr. Harrison not responding? He was panicking. The loan sharks were probably breathing down his neck. Patience, Gary, I whispered to my phone screen. The fall is coming. The weekend before the signing, things got ugly. The nice guy mask Gary had been wearing slipped completely. I was in the garden trying to distract myself by weeding the flower beds my mother had planted when Gary's car screeched into the driveway. He slammed the door and stormed up the walk. He looked terrible. Dark circles under his eyes, his skin pale and sweaty. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in a week. Where is the affidavit? He shouted, not even greeting me. My lawyer said Harrison hasn't sent the asset affidavit yet. I stood up wiping dirt from my gloves. Mr. Harrison is thorough. Gary, he's preparing it. Thorough? He's stalling? Gary got right in my face. I could smell alcohol on his breath and it was only 10 a.m. You're stalling. Are you playing games with me, Brenda? I'm not playing games, I said, stepping back. I told you I'd sign. Why are you in such a rush? Is there something wrong? No, he snapped too quickly. I just want to move on with my life. I have plans. I have opportunities. Opportunities, I repeated. Does this have anything to do with that investment you mentioned? None of your business, he spat. It's my money now. Or it will be. Look, Brenda, if you don't sign on Tuesday, I'm going to make things difficult. I know things about you. What things? I asked, genuinely confused. My life was an open book. I'll tell the court you're mentally unstable, he sneered. I'll tell them you've been depressed since your mother died, that you're not fit to manage the estate. I'll petition for conservatorship. I'll tie this money up for years until you're begging for pennies. It was a bluff and a weak one, but it showed me how low he was willing to go. He would destroy my reputation just to get his hands on the cash a few weeks earlier. You wouldn't, I whispered, channeling my inner victim. Try me, he hissed. I need that money, Brenda. I earned it putting up with you and your nagging mother for 15 years. That broke something inside me. He could insult me, but insulting my mother. Tuesday, I said, my voice hardening just a fraction. Tuesday at 2 p.m. Mr. Harrison's office. Bring Pamela. Pamela? Why? Because she's my support system. And honestly, Gary, I think she's the only person who truly understands what you're going through. He looked at me suspiciously, but his desperation won out. Fine, Tuesday. Don't be late, and bring the checkbook. He stormed off, kicking a garden gnome on his way out. I watched him go. My heart wasn't racing anymore. It was beating slow and steady like a wardrobe. I went inside and called Mr. Harrison. He's ready, I said. He threatened me today. Did you record it? Mr. Harrison asked. Yes, I said, tapping the phone in my pocket. Voice memo app crystal clear. Good girl, Mr. Harrison said. Bring that to the meeting. We might not need it for the clause, but it will be excellent leverage if he tries to fight the outcome. Is everything prepared? The trap is set, Mr. Harrison confirmed. I have the blind trust documents ready to reveal. I have the evidence you sent me, the photos, the debt letters, the credit card statements, all printed and mounted on presentation boards. Presentation boards? I asked. If we're going to do this, Brenda, we're going to do it with style. We're going to give them a show they will never forget. I hung up and looked around my empty house. It felt different now. It didn't feel like a mausoleum of a failed marriage. It felt like a fortress. My fortress. I spent the rest of Sunday preparing myself. I went to the salon and got my hair done. Not the sensible bob Gary liked, but a sleek, sharp cut. I bought a new dress. Red, the color of power, the color of blood. I was done being the victim. I was done being the shadow. Tuesday morning arrived with a gray ominous sky. It was perfect. I drove to the law office, my folder of evidence on the passenger seat. I thought about Pamela and Gary probably texting each other right now, giddy with anticipation, thinking about the millions they were about to steal. They were walking into a lion's den thinking they were the hunters. They had no idea that the lioness had been awake the whole time. And the best part, my mother had left me the key to the cage. Monday morning, the day before the big meeting. The sky was a bruised purple, heavy with unshed rain, matching the rowing anxiety in my stomach. I wasn't anxious about losing Gary. That ship had sailed, caught fire, and sunk. I was anxious about the precision of the execution. A trap only works if the spring is tight. I met the private investigator, a man named Mr. Vance, at a diner 3 towns over. Mr. Harrison had recommended him. He's expensive, Harrison had said, but he's a ghost. He'll get you things you didn't know existed. Mr. Vance didn't look like a ghost. He looked like a retired high school football coach. Thick neck, kind eyes, wearing a windbreaker. He slid a heavy binder across the formica table right next to my untouched pancakes. "You're not going to like this, Mrs. Miller," he said gently. "It's worse than you thought." I opened the binder. The first page was a summary of financials. My accountant brain latched onto the numbers immediately. "He's been funneling money to her for 3 years, Vance said, pointing to a highlighted column. "See these withdrawals? Consulting fees paid to a shell company called PM Designs. That's Pamela." I stared at the dates. 3 years. 3 years ago, I was working double shifts during tax season so we could afford to renovate the kitchen. Gary had told me business was slow. He had told me we needed to tighten our belts. Meanwhile, he was writing checks to Pamela for consulting. $5,000 here, I whispered, tracing the line. 2,000 there. God, Gary, the Christmas bonus. Gone. Vance nodded. Went straight to her car payments. I flipped the page. The financial betrayal was bad, but the emotional betrayal was a physical blow. Vance had done his job terrifyingly well. There were photos, not just the ones I took through the window. These were high resolution, taken with a telephoto lens over the last 4 days. Gary and Pamela shopping for furniture. Gary looking at engagement rings using a credit card that was likely in my name. But the worst one was a photo of them at a fertility clinic. I froze. The diner noise, the clutter of silverware, the sizzle of bacon faded into a buzzing white noise. They're trying to have a baby. I choked out. They had a consultation on Friday. Vance confirmed. Gary told the doctor he was coming into a significant inheritance that would cover the IVF treatments. I felt like I was going to throw up. Gary and I had tried for years. We had spent thousands. When it didn't happen, Gary had been so cold. He had said, "Maybe it's for the best, Brenda. Kids are expensive." He had made me feel like my body was broken, like I was defective. And now he was planning a family with my best friend, using my mother's money to pay for it. I closed the binder with a snap. My hands were shaking, but not from sadness. This was pure, unadulterated rage. It was a cold fire that cleared my head completely. "Is this enough?" I asked Vance for the clause. "Mrs. Miller, this is a slam dunk." Vance said, "I have them on video staying overnight at her place 3 nights in a row. I have the financial trail proving he's spending marital assets on a mistress. I have audio from a restaurant where they discuss waiting for your mother to die." I looked up sharply. "What?" "Track 4 on the USB drive," Vance said, his face grim. "Recorded 2 months before your mother passed. They were at an Italian place. Gary says, well, you should listen to it yourself." I didn't wait. I plugged the drive into my laptop right there in the diner. I put on my headphones. Static. Then the clinking of glasses. Gary's voice. "The old hag is holding on, Pam. It's taking forever." Pamela's laugh. That tinkling fake laugh I used to love. "Just be patient, baby. Cancer works fast. Once she's gone, Brenda will be a mess. She'll sign whatever you put in front of her. And then Cabo or Paris? Gary, Paris? Definitely Paris." I'm so sick of looking at her sad face. I need an upgrade. I took the headphones off. I placed them neatly on the table. The old hag. That's what he called my mother. The woman who paid for his car when it broke down. The woman who let us live in her basement for a year when Gary got laid off. "Thank you, Mr. Vance," I said, my voice steady. I pulled out my checkbook. "Add a 20% bonus to your fee. You sure you're okay to drive?" Vance asked, looking concerned. "I'm fantastic," I said. And I meant it. Because now I didn't just have leverage. I had a nuclear weapon. I spent the rest of the day organizing the evidence. I treated it like a tax audit. Exhibit A, the adultery. Photos, hotel receipts. Exhibit B, the financial fraud. The PM Designs checks, the debts. Exhibit C, the character assassination. The audio recording. I mounted them on black foam boards, just like Mr. Harrison had suggested. It felt like a school science project, only the subject was the anatomy of a scumbag. That evening, Gary came home to change clothes. He was whistling. He actually whistled as he walked past me in the kitchen. "Big day tomorrow, Brenda," he said, grabbing a bottle of water. "You ready to sign? Get this over with." I looked at him. I looked at the man I had shared a bed with for 15 years. I looked for any trace of the man I fell in love with. The charming guy who bought me flowers on our first date. He was gone. Maybe he never existed. All I saw was a parasite in a cheap suit. "I'm ready, Gary," I said, smiling. A real smile. "You have no idea how ready I am." "Good," he said, checking his reflection in the microwave door. "Make sure you wear something nice. My lawyer will be there. Let's keep it professional." "Oh, don't worry," I replied. "I'm going to dress for the occasion." He didn't notice the edge in my voice. He was too busy counting his chickens before they hatched. He walked out the door, whistling again. I waited until his tail lights disappeared. Then I went to my closet. I pushed aside the beige cardigans, the gray slacks, the sensible clothes Gary liked. I reached into the back to a garment bag I hadn't opened in years. Inside was a red dress, a structured crimson sheath dress that fit like a glove. I had bought it 5 years ago for a gala and Gary had made me return it because it was too aggressive. He said it made me look like I was trying too hard. I held it up against my body in the mirror. Tomorrow I wasn't going to be the sensible accountant. Tomorrow I was going to be the executioner, and executioners were red. The arrogance of the wicked is truly a fascinating thing to behold. You would think when committing a crime, and moral fraud is a crime of the soul, one would be quiet, discreet, careful. But Gary and Pamela, they were drunk on the fumes of a future that didn't exist. The night before the meeting, I couldn't sleep. Not because I was worried, but because my phone kept buzzing. It was notifications from Facebook. Now, Gary and Pamela were smart enough, or so they thought, to block me from seeing their direct posts. But they forgot how small our town was. They forgot about the network of mutual friends, the flying monkeys who love nothing more than a bit of gossip. My cousin Sarah sent me a screenshot at 11:30 p.m. Subject: "Have you seen this?" It was a post from Pamela. It was restricted to close friends, but Sarah was still on that list. The photo showed Pamela's hand, manicured with bright red polish, holding a set of keys. In the background, blurred but recognizable, was the entrance to the Oaks, the most exclusive gated community in our county. The caption read, "New beginnings. Keys in hand. The universe rewards those who wait. #manifested, #blessed, #upgrade." The first comment was from Gary. "You deserve the castle, queen." Pamela's reply: "Only because I found my king." I stared at the screen. The Oaks. The cheapest house in the Oaks started at $800,000. They hadn't just put a deposit down. They had likely signed a contract contingent on financing. Financing that they assumed would come from my bank account in less than 24 hours. They were spending money they didn't have, banking on a settlement I hadn't signed. It was reckless. It was stupid. It was perfect. I clicked on Pamela's profile picture. She had updated it an hour ago. It was just her face, glowing, heavily filtered. But if you looked closely at the reflection in her sunglasses, you could see Gary taking the photo. I saved everything. Screenshot. Save. Backup. The next morning, I woke up with a strange sense of calm. The storm had passed. Now it was just the cleanup. I went to the bank at 9 a.m. The teller, Mrs. Gable, knew me well. "Good morning, Brenda." She smiled. "Usual deposit?" "No, Mrs. Gable," I said. "I need a certified check." "Oh, buying something big, paying off a debt," I said cryptically. "Actually, I need 2 checks. One for $10 and one, well, just the one for now." I withdrew $10, a single crisp $10 bill. I put it in an envelope. That was going to be Gary's settlement. As I walked out of the bank, I ran into Linda, a woman from my book club. Linda was one of Pamela's minions. She was the type of woman who fed on drama like a vampire feeds on blood. "Brenda," she called out, rushing over, her eyes scanning my face for signs of a breakdown. "Oh my God, honey, I heard. Gary told Bob, who told me, divorce? Is it true?" "It is," I said, keeping my face impassive. "Oh, you poor thing," Linda cooed, placing a hand on my arm. "And with the inheritance and everything, it must be so overwhelming. Pamela is just heartbroken for you. She told me she's been crying for days." I almost laughed. Crying all the way to the bank, I thought. "Pamela is a true friend," I said, laying the trap. "She's actually coming to the settlement meeting today to support me." Linda's eyes widened. "Really? Wow, that's brave of her. You know, facing Gary after what he's putting you through." "Yes," I said. "She's very brave." "Listen, Linda, I have to run. Big day." "Good luck, sweetie," Linda called out. "Don't let him take everything." I got into my car and checked the time. 12 p.m. The meeting was at 2 p.m. I received a text from Gary. "Don't be late and don't bring drama. Let's get this signed and over with." I typed back, "I'll be there." With bells on, I drove to a scenic overlook near the river. I needed a moment of silence. I sat on the hood of my car and looked at the water. I thought about my mother. I thought about the sacrifices she made. She scrimped on clothes. She drove the same car for 20 years. She clipped coupons. Also, she could leave me something substantial. She wanted me to be safe. Gary wanted to take that safety and turn it into a midlife crisis sports car and a condo for his mistress. He wanted to erase my mother's legacy and replace it with his own vanity. "Not today, Satan," I said to the wind. I drove to the law office. I arrived at 1:45 p.m. I parked right next to Gary's car. I saw a new sticker on his back windshield. Lakeside Estates member. He was already claiming the status. I grabbed my garment bag from the back seat. I went into the building's restroom. I stripped off my gray slacks and white blouse. I stepped into the red dress. It fit perfectly. It hugged my curves, making me stand taller. I applied a coat of dark crimson lipstick. I put on my heels for inches, sharp enough to puncture a tire. I looked in the mirror. The tired, sad Brenda was gone. The woman staring back at me was fierce. She was dangerous. I walked out of the restroom, the heels clicking rhythmically on the marble floor. Click clack click clack. The sound of impending doom. I reached the door to the conference room. I could hear voices inside. Gary's booming laugh, Pamela's giggle. I'm telling you, babe, Gary was saying, once the check clears, we book the flight. First class. I can't wait to see the look on her face when she realizes we're together. Pamela laughed. She's so dense. I put my hand on the door handle. Dense, am I? I pushed the door open. It swung wide with a heavy whoosh. The laughter inside stopped instantly. Sorry I'm late, I said, my voice ringing clear and strong. Traffic was just like some people I know. The silence in the conference room was absolute. It wasn't the silence of a library. It was the silence of a bomb squad watching a wire get cut. Gary sat at the head of the table, or he had been sitting there until I walked in. Now he was half standing, his mouth slightly open. He was wearing his closer suit, the navy blue one he wore when he thought he was going to seal a big deal. Next to him sat Pamela. She wasn't wearing the supportive friend outfit I expected. She was wearing a white suit, white like a bride. The audacity took my breath away for a split second. But they weren't looking at my face. They were looking at the dress. The red dress. Brenda. Gary blinked as if he wasn't sure it was me. What are you wearing? I dressed for the occasion, Gary, I said, walking past him to take the seat next to Mr. Harrison. I didn't look at him. I looked at Mr. Harrison, who gave me a barely perceptible nod of approval. You look different, Pamela said, her voice tight. She pulled her blazer tighter around herself, suddenly seeming smaller. Divorce looks good on me, don't you think? I flashed a smile that didn't reach my eyes. I sat down and placed my large black portfolio on the table. I didn't open it yet. Gary's lawyer, a sweaty man named Mr. Blart, fitting, I thought, shuffled some papers. Mrs. Miller, we are here to finalize the separation agreement. My client, Mr. Miller, has been very generous in his terms. Generous, I repeated, tasting the word. Interesting choice of vocabulary. He is willing to waive his claim on the marital residence, Mr. Blart continued, droning on, in exchange for a 50-50 split of the liquid assets held in the Miller family trust. That amounts to roughly $1 million payable to Mr. Miller. Gary leaned back, regaining his composure. He smirked at me. I'm trying to be fair, Brenda. I know you love that house. It's full of your memories. I just want the cash so I can start fresh. Start fresh, I said. With Pamela? The air left the room again. Pamela choked on her water. Excuse me. Oh, drop the act, I said, bored. I know you're sleeping together. I know you're planning to buy a house in the Oaks. I know about the fertility clinic. Gary turned a shade of purple I had never seen before. That's slander. Who told you that? Nobody told me. Gary, I saw you. You're crazy. Pamela hissed. She's losing it. Gary, I told you she was unstable. Am I? I reached for my portfolio. Mr. Blart, before we discuss any settlements, I think you should see the addendum to my financial disclosure. Addendum? Mr. Blart looked confused. We didn't receive any addendum. I'm delivering it now. I opened the portfolio. I didn't take out the photos yet. I took out the financial spreadsheet Mr. Vance had compiled. I slid it across the polished mahogany table. It stopped right in front of Gary. What is this? Gary sneered, picking it up. That, I said calmly, is a ledger of every dollar you have stolen from our marital accounts over the last 3 years to fund Pamela's lifestyle. The car payments, the consulting fees, the jewelry, the hotel rooms. Gary's hands started to shake. He dropped the paper. This is irrelevant community property. I can spend money how I want. Actually, Mr. Harrison spoke up for the first time, his voice like gravel. Misappropriation of marital funds for the purpose of an extramarital affair is considered waste under state law. We will be deducting every single cent of that $150,000 from your share of any settlement. Fine. Gary slammed his hand on the table. Deduct it. Take the $150,000 off the million. I still walk away with $850,000. I don't care. Just sign the damn paper, Brenda. He was desperate. He didn't care about the shame. He just wanted the check. You seem very eager, Gary, I said. Is it because of the debts? I pulled out the next sheet, the red letter notices, the gambling debts, the loan shark notes. I laid them out like tarot cards. The star draft kings. The tower quick cash. Death. Tony the loan shark. Pamela leaned over to look. Her eyes widened. Gary, what is this? $200,000? Shut up, Pam. Gary snapped. He was sweating profusely now. It's handled. It's all handled once the check clears. He promised you a castle, didn't he, Pamela? I asked softly. But he's buying it with a mortgage he can't afford on a deposit he borrowed from criminals banking on money that hasn't been transferred. It will be transferred, Gary shouted, standing up right now. Sign the paper, Brenda, or I swear to God I will drag you through court for years. I will bleed that trust dry with legal fees. Sit down, Mr. Miller. Mr. Harrison barked. The authority in his voice made Gary drop back into his chair. You want to talk about the trust? Mr. Harrison asked, adjusting his glasses. Let's talk about the trust. I looked at Gary. I looked at Pamela. They were both terrified, but they were still holding on to hope. They thought this was just negotiation. They thought I was just trying to lower the payout. They had no idea the guillotine was already falling. Gary, I said, locking eyes with him. You filed for divorce on the grounds of irreconcilable differences, correct? Yes, he grunted. And you are admitting right here in front of witnesses that you are in a relationship with Pamela. I'm not admitting anything, he muttered. Oh, come on, I laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound. We're past that. I have the photos, Gary. I have the video. I have the audio of you calling my mother an old hag. Gary flinched. Pamela looked away. Okay, fine. Gary yelled. Yes, I'm with her. We're in love, and I filed for divorce. Are you happy now? Give me my money. Thank you, I said. That's all we needed. I turned to Mr. Harrison. Proceed. Mr. Harrison opened the thick file he had brought. The file with the red tape. The room went deadly silent. You could hear the hum of the air conditioner. Mr. Miller, Harrison began, you seem to be operating under the assumption that Brenda's inheritance is marital property. Normally, in a long marriage, commingling of funds might make that argument plausible. Gary nodded vigorously. Exactly, she used it for bills. However, Harrison continued, his voice dropping an octave. You failed to read the specific conditions of Eleanor Miller's last will and testament. Specifically, the fidelity clause regarding the trust. The what? Gary asked. The poison pill? I whispered. Poison pill? Pamela echoed, her voice shrill. What is she talking about, Gary? Gary ignored her, his eyes fixed on the document Mr. Harrison was holding. What clause? I saw the will. It said she gets everything. You saw the summary, Mr. Harrison corrected. You never asked to read the full trust instrument. You were too busy asking about wire transfer limits. Mr. Harrison slid the document across the table. He didn't slide it to Gary's lawyer. He slid it directly to Gary. Read Article 4, Section C aloud, please. Gary picked up the paper. His hands were shaking so badly the paper rattled. He squinted. In the event of a dissolution of marriage, he mumbled. Louder, I commanded. I want Pamela to hear this. Gary cleared his throat. In the event of a dissolution of marriage, if the said marriage is terminated due to the proven adultery of the beneficiary's spouse, he stopped. He swallowed hard. Keep reading, Mr. Harrison said. Then the conditional blind trust shall be immediately dissolved, and the entirety of the principal and interest. Gary's voice dropped to a whisper. She'll be transferred to Brenda Miller as her sole and separate property, free and clear of any marital claims. Gary stopped reading. He looked up at me. His eyes were wide, empty holes of shock. There's more, I said. Read the next paragraph. The one about what happens if you try to fight it. Gary couldn't speak, so Mr. Harrison read it for him. Furthermore, should the adulterous spouse attempt to litigate or claim any portion of this estate, the trustee is instructed to liquidate all assets immediately and donate the full sum to the Happy Tales Animal Rescue Charity. In this event, neither Brenda Miller nor Gary Miller shall receive a single penny. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. It felt like the air had turned into concrete. So, I said, leaning forward, my elbows on the table, here is the situation, Gary. You filed for divorce. You admitted to the affair. I have proof of the affair. That means the condition is met. No, Gary whispered. No, that's not legal. It is ironclad, Mr. Harrison said. I wrote it myself, and I've defended it in court 3 times. You filed the papers, Mr. Miller. You triggered the clause. By your own action, you have disqualified yourself from receiving any part of the inheritance. Gary looked at his lawyer. Do something. Say something. Mr. Blart was wiping sweat off his forehead with a handkerchief. Hi, I need to review the case law, but if this trust structure is valid, Mr. Miller, you might have a problem. A problem? Gary screamed, standing up and kicking his chair back. I have a $2 million problem. I need that money. You don't get the money, Gary, I said calmly. It's mine. All of it. Every single dime. And if you try to sue me for it, if you try to argue community property, then I push the button. I donate it all to the dogs. I will happily live in a cardboard box before I let you spend my mother's money on your mistress. I turned my gaze to Pamela. She was pale. Her white suit looked like a shroud. And Pamela, I said, did you hear that? 0. He gets 0. That house in the Oaks, he can't afford it. That ring, he probably put it on a credit card that's about to be declined. Those IVF treatments not happening. Pamela turned slowly to look at Gary. The adoration in her eyes was gone, replaced by a look of pure, calculating horror. Gary, she said, her voice trembling. Tell me this isn't true. Tell me you have the money. Aye, Gary stammered. Babe, we can fight this. We can sue. If you sue, the money disappears. Pamela shrieked. She just said it. Are you deaf? It's a bluff. Gary yelled. She won't give $2 million to a dog shelter. Try me, I said. I pulled out my phone. I have the director of Happy Tales on speed dial. Want me to call him? I'm sure the puppies need a new wing. I held my thumb over the call button. I stared Gary down. He looked at me. He saw the red dress. He saw the cold eyes. And for the first time in our marriage, he realized he didn't know me at all. He realized I wasn't bluffing. He slumped back against the wall defeated. You planned this, he whispered. You led me on. You made me think. I made you think you won, I said. My mother warned me about you, Gary. She knew you were weak. She knew you were greedy. She set the trap. I just put out the cheese. You bitch, he spat. That's rich to you, I corrected. I stood up and closed my portfolio. So, here are your options, Gary. Option A, you sign the waiver right now, admitting to the affair and waiving all claims to the inheritance. We finalize the divorce today. You walk away with your debt and your mistress. Option B, you fight me. I donate the money. I sue you for the $150,000 you stole. I press charges for fraud. And I drag this out until you are living in a refrigerator box under the bridge. I paused. Tick-tock. Gary, the loan sharks aren't known for their patience. Gary looked at Pamela. He was pleading with his eyes. Help me. But Pamela wasn't looking at him. She was looking at her phone, probably checking if she could get a refund on the deposit for the house. Sign it, Pamela said coldly. Gary blinked. What? Sign the waiver, Gary? Pamela snapped. If you fight her, we get nothing and you get sued. If you sign, maybe we can figure something out. Figure something out. Gary laughed hysterically. I owe Tony 50 grand by Friday. I don't have a job. I don't have a house. Not my problem, Pamela muttered, standing up and gathering her purse. Not your problem. Gary's face twisted in rage. You spent half the money. The car is yours. The jewelry is yours. Gifts, Pamela said, smoothing her skirt. Those were gifts. You can't take back gifts. And there it was. The sharks were turning on each other. The room descended into chaos and I stood in the eye of the storm watching. It was beautiful in a grotesque way. Gifts. Gary roared, lunging toward Pamela. Mr. Blard had to step in, putting a chubby arm between them. I stole from my wife for you. I ruined my life for you. You told me we were partners. I thought you were a man, Gary. Pamela screamed back, her classy facade completely shattering. I thought you had money. You lied to me. You said the inheritance was a sure thing. You pushed me to file. Gary yelled. You said do it now. Do it before she changes her mind. This is your fault. Excuse me, Mr. Harrison interrupted, his voice cutting through the noise like a knife. While this domestic dispute is fascinating, my client pays by the hour. Mr. Miller, are you going to sign the waiver or should I call the charity? Gary looked wild. He looked from Pamela to me, then to the document. He was cornered. He was broke. And he knew he was beaten. He snatched the pen from the table. He didn't look at me. He scribbled his signature on the waiver so hard he tore the paper there. He shoved it at Mr. Harrison. Take it. I hope you choke on it. Acknowledged, Mr. Harrison said, stamping the document. The divorce will be final within 24 hours. You have 30 days to vacate the storage unit where you moved the marital furniture. The locks on the house have already been changed. You changed the locks? Gary asked. Looking at me yesterday, I said, and I installed cameras. Don't try to come back, Gary. Tony the loan shark might be looking for you there. Gary turned to Pamela. Pam, babe, we can go to your place. We can figure this out. I can get a job. We can sell the ring. Pamela took a step back. She looked at Gary with pure disgust. My place? My place is small, Gary. There's no room for you. What? Gary looked like he had been punched. But we're supposed to be together. We're getting married. Married? Pamela laughed. It was a cruel, harsh sound. I'm not marrying a broke, unemployed loser with gambling debt. Get away from me. She turned to leave. Wait, I said, Pamela, before you go. She stopped, her hand on the doorknob. She looked at me, trying to summon some dignity. What? I just wanted to let you know, I said, smiling sweetly. I sent an email to your boss at the HR firm this morning. Pamela froze. You what? You work in human resources, right? Ethics is a big part of your job. I sent them the photos. The evidence of you knowingly helping a married man embezzle marital funds. I think there's a clause in your contract about moral turpitude. Pamela's face went gray. You couldn't. Oh, I did. And I attached the audio file where you laughed about my mother dying of cancer. I think the board of directors will find that very enlightening. You, Pamela shrieked, rushing toward me. Mr. Vance, the private investigator who had been standing quietly in the corner I had hired him as security for the day, stepped forward. He was a wall of muscle. Pamela bounced off him. I think it's time for you to leave, Mr. Vance said. Pamela looked at me one last time. Her eyes were filled with hate, but mostly with fear. She knew her life was imploding. She turned and ran out of the room, her heels clacking frantically down the hall. Gary was left standing alone. He looked at the door where she had vanished. Then he looked at me. She left me, he whispered. She never loved you, Gary, I said, feeling a twinge of pity that vanished instantly. She loved the lifestyle you promised her. And now that you're empty, she's gone. I have nothing, Gary said. Tears were streaming down his face now. Brenda, please. I'm sorry. I made a mistake. I was confused. Please help me. I have nowhere to go. Tony is going to break my legs. I looked at him. This man who had thrown away 15 years for a fantasy. You have the $10? I said, what? I reached into my purse. I pulled out the envelope with the single $10 bill. I slid it across the table. Your settlement. Don't spend it all in one place. Gary stared at the envelope. He didn't pick it up. Goodbye, Gary, I said. I turned and walked out of the conference room. I walked past the stunned receptionist. I walked out into the cool afternoon air. The sun had come out. The pavement was wet and shining. I felt lighter, physically lighter. The weight of the lies, the gaslighting, the betrayal, it was all gone. I was alone, yes, but I was free and I was rich. But the best part wasn't the money. The best part was knowing that my mother was somewhere up there watching. I looked up at the sky. Checkmate, Mom, I whispered. Checkmate. If you are listening to this and cheering for Brenda, please hit that like button and comment Team Brenda below. Let me know what you would have done in my shoes. Now, let me tell you what happened in the aftermath because karma wasn't done with them yet. The door to the conference room clicked shut behind me, but the air in the hallway didn't feel empty. It felt electric. My heart was pounding, not with fear, but with the adrenaline of a skydiver who had just landed perfectly on the target. I walked toward the elevators, expecting to just leave, but Mr. Harrison caught up with me. His face was flushed with the thrill of the kill. Brenda, wait, he said, holding a thick leather folder. We aren't quite done. There is one final detail your mother insisted on. A detail she didn't want revealed until the ink was dry on that waiver. I stopped. There's more. Mr. Harrison. Gary just signed away everything. He's ruined. What more could there be? Mr. Harrison guided me to a small alcove near the window, away from the prying ears of the receptionist. He opened the folder and pointed to a sub-clause in the trust document buried deep in the legal of the appendix. It was titled the Legacy Protection Protocol. Your mother knew Gary better than you did, Brenda, Mr. Harrison said softly. She knew that Gary is a manipulator. She knew that once the reality of his poverty hit him, he would come crawling back. He wouldn't come back for love. He would come back to play on your guilt. He would use your history, your memories, even your pity to get a foothold back into your bank account. I nodded. I knew he was right. Gary was the type of man who would weep and beg, claiming he was starving just to get me to write a check. And the old Brenda, the Brenda from yesterday, she might have caved. She might have given him $5,000 just to make him go away. So, Mr. Harrison continued, tapping the paper. Eleanor added this. It's a freeze provision. It states that for a period of 5 years following the divorce, if you, Brenda Miller, provide any financial assistance to Gary Miller, be it a loan, a gift, co-signing a lease, or even paying for his groceries, the entire trust freezes immediately. Freezes? I asked, stunned. Completely. The account's locked down. You lose access to the principal and the interest for 12 months per infraction. The money goes into a holding account managed by a third-party firm in Switzerland. Essentially, if you give Gary $1, you lose access to your millions. I stared at him and then a laugh bubbled up in my throat. It started as a chuckle and turned into a full-body release. Tears squeezed out of the corners of my eyes. She handcuffed me, I whispered. She knew I would be too soft, so she forced me to be strong. She didn't handcuff you, Brenda. Mr. Harrison smiled, handing me the copy. She gave you a shield. When he calls, and he will call, you don't have to say no. I won't help you. You can say I can't. Mom won't let me. It was the ultimate checkmate. Even from the grave, Eleanor was standing between me and my toxic ex-husband, arms crossed, protecting her daughter. I took the elevator down to the lobby, clutching that document like a holy scripture. As the doors opened to the ground floor, my phone buzzed. It was Gary. He hadn't even left the building yet. Brenda, please be reasonable. I can't leave. Pamela took the car keys. She said it's her car because the payments were made from her account, which was a lie. We know it was my money. I'm stranded. Can you just Venmo me $50 for an Uber, please? I'm begging you. I looked at the text. I imagined him upstairs sweating in that expensive suit he couldn't afford, realizing his ride-or-die mistress had just left him for dead. $50. It was nothing, a lunch money. But then I looked at the document in my hand. The freeze provision. I typed back slowly, savoring every letter. Gary, per the terms of the trust, if I send you even 1 penny, the entire estate locks down. My hands are tied. You are a smart guy. I'm sure you can walk. It's a nice day for it. I hit send. I walked out to the parking lot. The sun was blindingly bright. I saw Pamela's car, a white convertible Mercedes that I had unknowingly paid for, screeching out of the lot. She didn't look back. She didn't wait for her soulmate. She was fleeing the scene of the crime before the cops arrived. And there, standing on the sidewalk, looking small and pathetic against the towering glass facade of the law firm, was Gary. He was holding his phone, staring at it in disbelief. He looked up and saw me. He started to run toward me. Brenda, wait. I didn't stop. I got into my car. I locked the doors. He reached my window, banging on the glass. Brenda, she took the car. She left me. I have nothing. You can't do this. We were married for 15 years. I put the key in the ignition. The engine purred to life. I lowered the window just an inch, enough for my voice to carry, but not enough for his desperate fingers to reach in. We were married, Gary, I said, my voice cold as ice. But you divorced me, remember? You wanted half. Well, you got exactly what you brought to the table, nothing. I'll sue you, he screamed, his face twisting into that ugly red mask I used to fear. I'll tell everyone you tricked me. Go ahead, I said. Tell them how you cheated on your wife, stole her money, planned a life with her best friend, and got outsmarted by a dead woman. I'm sure it's a great story. I rolled up the window. I put the car in drive, and as I pulled away watching him shrink in my rearview mirror, a tiny waving figure in a suit that no longer fit his reality, I felt the last tether snap. I wasn't just free, I was untouchable. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but let me tell you, watching the immediate implosion of 2 narcissists is a dish best served hot with a side of popcorn. I didn't have to wait long for the dog-eat-dog show to begin. In fact, it started before I even got home. I stopped at a red light about 3 blocks from the law office. To my right was a gas station. And there, screaming at each other near the air pumps, were Pamela and Gary. Apparently, Gary had run after her car and caught her at the light. He was clinging to the door handle of the white Mercedes. I pulled into the parking lot of the pharmacy across the street, lowered my sunglasses, and watched. I wasn't proud of it, but I deserved this front row seat. Open the door, Pam. Gary was screaming. People were starting to stare. I paid for this car. It's mine. You paid for it with her money. Pamela shrieked back, her window barely cracked. It's in my name. Get away from me, you loser. Loser. Gary kicked the tire. You were calling me king this morning. You said we were going to Paris. Open the door. I have nowhere to go. Go to hell. Pamela yelled. She gunned the engine. The car lurched forward. Gary stumbled back, falling onto the dirty pavement. His navy blue suit pants ripped at the knee. Pamela sped off, running a red light in her haste to escape the stench of failure. Gary sat there on the asphalt, surrounded by oil stains and cigarette butts. He looked like a child whose balloon had just popped. He put his head in his hands. I could have felt pity. I searched my heart for it, but all I found was the memory of the fertility clinic brochure. The memory of them laughing about the old hag. I put my car in gear and drove home. But the fallout was just beginning. Over the next week, the destruction of their lives was systematic, brutal, and entirely self-inflicted. The repossession 2 days later, I was at home sipping tea in my garden when I saw a tow truck pull up to the curb. But it wasn't for me. It was heading toward the storage unit facility down the road where Gary had arrogantly moved all our marital furniture and his precious silver sedan. I had tipped off the financing company about his location. Petty, maybe necessary. Absolutely. Later, I heard from a friend who works at the storage center that Gary had arrived just in time to see his car being hoisted onto the truck. He had tried to block the driver. He had screamed about a wire transfer that was coming any day now. The driver, a guy named Mike, who had heard every excuse in the book, just handed him a clipboard and drove off. Gary was left standing in the dust with a box of clothes and a set of golf clubs he couldn't afford to play with. Pamela's public execution. My email to Pamela's HR department didn't just get her fired, it turned her into a pariah. You see, Pamela worked for a conservative, family values-oriented company. They didn't take kindly to finding out their VP of Human Resources was embezzling petty cash and conspiring to defraud a grieving widow. Linda, the town gossip, called me 3 days later, breathless. Brenda, did you hear? Hear what, Linda? I asked, feigning ignorance while filing my nails. Pamela was escorted out of her building by security with a box. And get this, Jane from accounting told me they found thousands of dollars in unauthorized expenses. She was using the company credit card to pay for hotel rooms for her and Gary. Oh my, I said that sounds criminal. It is. Linda squealed. They are threatening to press charges if she doesn't pay it back immediately. She has to sell her condo, Brenda. She's putting it on the market tomorrow. Distressed sale. She's ruined. Well, I said karma has a funny way of balancing the books, doesn't it? The loan shark. And then there was Tony, the shadowy figure from the red letters. I never saw Tony, but I saw the results. A week after the divorce was finalized, I saw Gary's mug shot on the local news website. He had been arrested for shoplifting. Shoplifting. A man who 2 weeks ago was browsing brochures for million-dollar homes was caught trying to steal a sandwich and a bottle of vodka from a 7-Eleven. When the police booked him, they found he had a black eye and 2 broken fingers. He claimed he fell, but we all knew Tony had come to collect and Gary had paid in pain because he couldn't pay in cash. I stared at that mug shot. His eyes were hollow, just like Mom had said, but now they were also haunted. He looked like a man who had seen the abyss and realized he dug it himself. I closed the laptop. I didn't feel happy seeing him hurt. I wasn't a sadist, but I felt a profound sense of justice. The universe had corrected a glitch. The balance was restored. I walked into my kitchen, my beautiful, quiet, peaceful kitchen, and started to make dinner. 41, and for the first time in 15 years, the silence didn't feel lonely. It felt like a symphony. With the pest removed, it was time to clean the house. And I don't mean dusting, I mean an exorcism. I woke up on a Saturday morning with an energy I hadn't felt since my 20s. The sun was streaming through the blinds, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. I looked around the living room. That beige recliner where Gary used to sit and ignore me for hours while watching football. It had to go. The curtains Pamela had convinced me to buy because they were chic, but were actually drab and depressing. Gone. The coffee maker Gary insisted on, the one that required expensive pods we couldn't afford. Trash. I hired a company called Junk Be Gone. 2 massive guys showed up with a truck. What goes, lady? The lead guy asked. Everything that doesn't bring me joy, I said, channeling Marie Kondo with a vengeance. We started in the bedroom. The mattress gone. I wasn't sleeping on the ghost of a failed marriage. The nightstand on his side gone. His clothes that he left behind. Wait, I said to the movers. Don't take the clothes yet. I took Gary's suits, the cheap ones he thought made him look rich, and I carried them to the backyard. I had a fire pit. It was a chilly morning, perfect for a bonfire. I didn't burn them all, that would be bad for the environment. But I burned one tie. The ugly yellow one he wore the day he told me I was boring. Watching that synthetic fabric curl and melt was therapeutic. It smelled like burning plastic and liberation. Then I went to the man cave. This room had been forbidden territory for years. It was dark, smelled of stale cigars and secrets. Clear it out, I told the movers. Down to the studs. They hauled out the heavy desk where he had hidden his gambling debts. They hauled out the leather chair where he had plotted with Pamela. They hauled out the mini fridge. When the room was empty, I stood in the center of it. It echoed. It was just a square box of drywall and carpet. It wasn't scary anymore. It was a blank canvas. Paint, I whispered. I need paint. I drove to the hardware store. I didn't go to the one where Gary was now working. Thank God he was at a store 2 towns over. I bought gallons of paint. What color? The clerk asked. Sunshine yellow, I said. And ocean blue. I spent the next 3 days painting. I blasted music. Modern, Aretha Franklin, loud, soulful music that Gary hated. I sang into the paint roller. I danced in my old t-shirt covered in speckles of yellow and blue. I transformed the man cave into a library. My library. I bought floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. I bought a velvet chaise lounge in a deep rich teal. I bought a rug that felt like walking on clouds. I filled the shelves with the books I had kept in boxes because Gary said they cluttered up the place. Jane Austen, Stephen King, memoirs, poetry. I put a framed photo of my mother on the central shelf right where she could see everything. "This is better, isn't it, Mom?" I asked her. The room felt warm. It felt like me. But the physical purge was only half the battle. I needed to purge the digital ghosts, too. I sat down at my new desk with a glass of Pinot Grigio. I opened my laptop. I went to my social media friend request, Gary Miller. He had created a new account. No profile picture. Delete block. I went to my email subject. "Please, Brenda, just read this from Gary Miller 1980@gmail.com. Delete block." Then I opened the folder labeled the evidence, the photos of the affair, the audio recordings, the financial spreadsheets. I hovered my mouse over the delete button. Should I keep them just in case? No. Keeping them meant keeping the pain. Keeping them meant letting them live rent-free in my hard drive. I dragged the folder to the trash. I emptied the trash. "Are you sure you want to permanently delete these items?" "Yes." As the progress bar moved across the screen, I felt a physical weight lift off my chest. I wasn't a victim anymore. I wasn't a detective anymore. I was just Brenda. The next day, a letter arrived in the mail. It was a heavy cream-colored envelope. It was from the corporate headquarters of Pamela's former company. "Dear Ms. Miller, we write to thank you for bringing the financial irregularities regarding Ms. Pamela Stone to our attention. Your detailed documentation allowed us to recover significant assets. As a token of our appreciation for your integrity, please accept the enclosed voucher." It was a gift card for a high-end spa, $500. I laughed out loud. Pamela had tried to steal my life, and in the end, she paid for my massage. I booked the appointment immediately. The Phoenix Rising package because that's what I was. I was rising from the ashes of their treachery and I was doing it with glowing skin and a perfectly painted library. The year that followed was a blur of color, taste, and sensation. It was as if I had been living in black and white for 15 years and suddenly someone turned on the Technicolor. I used the inheritance wisely. I didn't blow it on cars or mansions. I invested just like Mom would have wanted, but I carved out a joy fund. I finally took that trip to Italy. Gary had always said, "Why go to Italy? It's expensive and full of tourists. Let's just go to the casino." I went alone, but I wasn't lonely. I remember sitting in a small piazza in Florence. The air smelled of roasted chestnuts and espresso. I was wearing a linen dress and oversized sunglasses. I ordered a glass of Chianti and a plate of truffle pasta. When the waiter placed it in front of me, I took a bite. It was earthy, rich, creamy. It tasted like freedom. I looked around. I saw couples arguing over maps. I saw families dragging tired children. And I sat there in my solitude, completely at peace. I didn't have to ask anyone what they wanted to eat. I didn't have to worry if the hotel room was too expensive. I didn't have to apologize for existing. I raised my glass to the empty chair opposite me. "Salute, Brenda," I whispered. "You made it." When I returned home, I launched Eleanor's Legacy. It started small. Just a few clients, women from my church who were going through divorces and suspected their husbands were hiding money. I used my forensic accounting skills to find the hidden accounts, the offshore shells, the crypto wallets. I became known as the divorce detective. There is a specific look a woman gives you when you tell her you're not crazy. He is stealing from you. And here is the proof. It's a look of validation, of relief. It was the same look I had when Mr. Vance handed me that binder. Giving that power to other women became my purpose. One afternoon, about 14 months after the divorce, I was walking out of my office building. It was a crisp autumn day, much like the one where my life fell apart. I was checking my email on my phone, distracted when I nearly bumped into a man sweeping the sidewalk. "Excuse me," I said, stepping aside. The man froze. He stopped sweeping. He looked up. It was Gary. He was wearing a uniform for a city sanitation subcontractor, an orange vest over a stained gray hoodie. He looked 10 years older. His hair was thinning, his face lined with the stress of a hard life. He was missing a tooth, probably a souvenir from Tony. We stood there on the sidewalk. The man who had worn $2,000 suits and checked his watch while breaking my heart was now sweeping cigarette butts off the pavement in front of my business. "Brenda," he croaked. His voice was rough. I looked at him. I looked at the broom in his hand. I thought I would feel triumphant. I thought I would want to gloat, but I didn't. I just felt distant, like I was looking at a stranger I used to know in a past life. "Hello, Gary," I said politely. He swallowed hard. He looked at my designer bag. He looked at the sign above the door. "Eleanor's Legacy Financial Consulting. You look good," he said. "You look happy." "I am," I said simply. I'm working my way back up, he said, trying to stand a little straighter, clutching the broom like a lifeline. It's honest work. I'm paying off my debts slowly. That's good, Gary. I'm glad to hear it. He hesitated. Pamela, she contacted me last week. She wanted to know if I wanted to get a drink. She's living in a trailer park now. And I told her to lose my number, Gary said, a shadow of his old pride flickering in his eyes. I may be broke, Brenda, but I'm not stupid anymore. She cost me the best thing I ever had. He looked at me with puppy dog eyes. He was fishing. He was hoping for a crumb, a smile, a maybe we can get coffee. I adjusted my scarf. Well, I said, it sounds like you learned a valuable lesson. It was an expensive tuition, Gary. I hope it was worth it. Brenda, he took a step forward. I have a meeting. I cut him off. Good luck with the sweeping, Gary. You missed a spot over there. I pointed to a wrapper on the ground, stepped around him, and walked to my car. I didn't look back. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. I wasn't the sad, discarded wife anymore. I was the protagonist, and the protagonist doesn't look back at the extras. Yesterday, I drove out to the cemetery. It was the 2nd anniversary of Mom's passing. The cemetery is beautiful this time of year. The maples are turning fire red and gold, dropping leaves like confetti over the quiet stones. I walked to Mom's grave. It's a simple stone, gray granite. Eleanor Miller, beloved mother, sharp mind, fierce heart. I laid a blanket down on the grass and sat cross-legged. I brought 2 cups of coffee from her favorite diner. One for me, one for the stone. It might seem crazy to talk to a rock, but I know she's listening. I know she's there in the wind, in the rustle of the leaves, in the steel of my spine. Hey, Mom, I said, taking a sip of the coffee. You'll never guess who I saw yesterday. Gary, he's sweeping streets now. I laughed softly. You were right. You were right about everything. You told me he was weak. You told me Pamela was a vampire. I didn't want to listen. I wanted to prove you wrong. I wanted to believe that my love was enough to change them. I traced the letters of her name. But you didn't judge me. You didn't lecture me. You just prepared for the day I would need a parachute. You were that safety net with your own hands, with every dollar you saved, with every smart investment you made. I reached into my bag and pulled out the latest financial report for Eleanor's legacy. We helped 50 women this year, Mom. 50 women who were being lied to, cheated on, and stolen from. We got them their settlements. We got them their dignity back. I'm doing it in your name. The wind picked up, swirling the leaves around me. I felt a sudden wave of emotion, not sadness, but gratitude so deep it ached. Thank you, I whispered, tears hot on my cheeks. Thank you for the poison pill. Thank you for the freeze claws. Thank you for teaching me that being alone is better than being with someone who makes you feel lonely. I thought about the last 2 years. The pain of the betrayal was like a forest fire. It burned everything down. It was terrifying. It was destructive. But forest fires are also natural. They clear out the dead wood. They clear out the rot. They make room for new growth. And looking at my life now, the growth is lush. It is green. It is vibrant. I have friends who love me for me, not for what I can do for them. I have a business that matters. I have a home that is my sanctuary, and I have myself. I stood up and brushed the grass off my pants. I poured the 2nd cup of coffee onto the earth over her grave. Drink up, Mom. You earned it. As I walked back to my car, I saw a young woman sitting by a fresh grave a few rows over. She was crying. She looked devastated, lost, terrified. She looked exactly like I did 2 years ago. I stopped. I walked over to her. Excuse me, I said softly. She looked up startled. Yes. I reached into my purse and pulled out my business card. Eleanor's legacy. I don't know what you're going through, I said. But if you ever feel like you're drowning, call me. You're stronger than you think. The woman took the card. She looked at it, then up at me. A tiny spark of hope flickered in her eyes. Thank you, she whispered. I smiled. Don't thank me. Thank Eleanor. I got into my car, my sensible, reliable luxury SUV that I paid cash for, and drove out of the cemetery gates. My husband filed for divorce to be with my best friend. He thought he hit the jackpot. He thought he won, but he forgot the most important rule of gambling. The house always wins. And my mother, she was the house. Thank you so much for journeying with me through this storm. If Brenda's victory gave you chills, or if you have an Eleanor in your life who protects you, please hit that like button right now. It helps so much. And I want to know, what was your favorite part of Brenda's revenge? Was it the red dress, the $10 settlement, or Gary sweeping the streets? Let me know in the comments below with the hashtag #TeamLenore. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories of justice served cold. Until next time, stay strong, stay smart, and read the fine print.